Hey YouTube, Kira Twig here, bringing you all an update to my Appliancer Yugioh deck profile for April 2023. For those who don't know, the Appliancer deck was a deck from the Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrain series used by Robopi, one of Ai's friends, and also made villain in the third season of the anime. This deck focuses on being able to co-link a bunch of different Appliancer link monsters by setting them up by using our main deck monsters to summon them out onto the field and then gaining different effects, whether they are co-linked or not co-linked, to the many different Appliancer monsters that become the main focus of our extra deck. Maybe we'll get some new Appliancers for the extra deck. We definitely need some for the main deck because we only have 3 main deck monsters to work with. But until then, we'll work with what we got for the deck. So let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. So we'll go ahead and start off with the main deck monsters. For the Appliancer main deck monsters, we run 3 copies of Appliancer Socket Roll. If you control an Appliancer monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. If another Appliancer Socket Roll is special summoned to your field while you control this monster, you can, except during the damage step, special summon 1 Appliancer Socket Roll from your deck. You can only use this effect of Appliancer Socket Roll once per turn. So this card just lets you set up as many Appliancer Socket Rolls as you can, just being a special summon, and then having that another special summon of the Socket Roll that was already on the field get you the final copy, because the Appliancer Link monsters are all actually Link 1 monsters, so the main setup you want to go for is getting out your Appliancer Celtopus and then being able to use your other Appliancer monsters to co-link or not be co-linked depending on where they are on the field, with that monster being your main go-to Link 2 boss monster and having all the other ones have link arrows that can point quite easily to it. So Socket Roll can easily do this if you have those 2 monsters ready for the setup. We are also running 3 copies of Appliancer Copy Buckle. With this card, you can target 1 Appliancer monster you control, special summon this card from your hand. If you do, this card's name becomes that monster's name until the end phase. During the main phase, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card in your graveyard, target 1 Appliancer monster you control, special summon 1 monster with the same name from your hand or deck. You can only use each effect of Appliancer Copy Buckle once per turn. So as the name suggests, Copy Buckle is just meant to copy cards like your Socket Roll and take on its name, giving the card effect of Socket Roll being able to resolve, since you can use Copy Buckle and have other copies of Socket Roll in the main deck to then special summon out with Socket Roll's own card effect, just being able to have that special summon be another resource for this card, being able to target this card and special summon it, and its name becomes the name of that other monster. And for the last of the Appliancer monsters, we run 3 copies of Appliancer Breaker Bunkle. During damage calculation, if an Appliancer monster you control battles an opponent's monster, quick effect, you can discard this card for that battle. That monster cannot be destroyed, and also you take no battle damage. And if an Appliancer monster you control would be destroyed by a card effect, you can banish this card from your field or graveyard instead. So you can use your Breaker Bunkle as a protection card on the field for your Appliancer monsters, and also setting it up in the graveyard by just being able to send it from your hand to the graveyard with a discard of this card. So a lot of your Appliancer monsters, like your Appliancer Celtopus, do have some low attack stats, so you can at least use this card as a protection means to have the card make it so you don't have to take any battle damage and not be destroyed by that battle. For some of the other generic main deck monsters, I also run 3 copies of Gameciel, the Sea Turtle Kaiju. You don't necessarily have to run this lineup of Kaiju. I just chose a particular lineup, being Gameciel, because you're just going to use it to give to your opponent's monster and tribute their other peskier monsters that your Appliancer monsters may not be able to get over, and then just give them a weak 2200 attack by monster for you to swing over with some of your other Appliancer Link monsters, with the last of the main deck monsters being 1 copy of Psyframe Driver and 3 copies of Psyframe Gear Gamma for a monster effect negation, and then also just clearing up some of your field for your Appliancer monsters to summon out, while also just being able to take out one of your opponent's main deck monsters that they may have summoned, trying to initiate their first play on the field. And that is it for the main deck monsters. We'll now move on to the spells. I run 3 copies of Appliancer Electrolyrical World. This field spell, when it's activated, you can add 1 Appliancer card from your deck to your hand, except for the field spell. Once per turn, if you link summon an Appliancer Link monster, you can add 1 Appliancer monster from your graveyard to your hand. And once per turn, when a monster declares an attack, you can move 1 Appliancer monster you control to another of your main monster zones. You can only use 1 Appliancer Electrolyrical World per turn. So this is a pretty complicated card to use right with your Appliancer monsters, since depending on where where they are, you can make it so they are co-linked or not co-linked, depending on where you move them on the field when that attack is declared to another main monster zone, moving those different appliance monsters to work with your Appliancer Celtopus being the monster you'll want to keep in the extra monster zone. And we also run 3 copies of Appliancer Test. Target 1 Appliancer Link monster you control. Special summon as many Link 1 Appliancer monsters from your graveyard as possible to zones that card points to, but banish them during the end phase. You can activate 1 Appliancer Test per turn. So your Appliancer monsters cannot be used as Link summon the turn they are summoned. So you want to get out your main go-to play with those cards, but if they're destroyed during the next turn, you can at least summon them out back onto the field and reuse those monsters, since if they are special summoned from the graveyard, they were not summoned out as a Link summon, so you can use those cards as Link material and avoid them being banished during the end phase with this card. Our last 3 for the Appliancer cards are 3 copies of Appliancer Reuse. You target 1 Appliancer monster in your graveyard, special summon it, and place it on the bottom of the deck when it leaves the field. So this is just a monster reborn from the graveyard, and the monster will be placed back on the bottom of the deck when it leaves the field, so it takes it so you don't have that resource in the graveyard for you to reuse again. But this card is not a once per turn, so if you have multiple resources in the graveyard and multiple Appliancer Reuse in your hand, you have more ways to get those special summons back onto the field and co-link or non-co-link your different Appliancer Link monsters. I also run 2 copies of Appliancer Conversion. You banish as many Appliancer Link monsters from your main monster zone as possible. Then you can special summon your banished Appliancer Link monsters up to the number of banished by this effect. So with this, you get a special summon of those banished monsters, and this just allows you to replace the monsters on the field depending on where they were co-linked or non-co-linked on the field. And you can banish one other Appliancer spell trap from your graveyard to add this card to your hand. You can only use each effect of Appliancer Conversion once per turn, but it's also why we're only running 2 copies of this card. You can just re-add this card back to your hand by banishing some of the other Appliancer cards, whether it be the many reuse we use or the multiple field spells we may activate, so we can get the additional search with this card. For some more generic spell support that we run in the deck, also running 3 copies of Machine Duplication just for the special summon of any of our Appliancer monsters, since you can just summon it out. You use Machine Duplication and get 2 additional copies regardless of the Appliancer monsters that we have in the deck thanks to this card. I also run 3 copies of Where Art Thou. You really don't take any life point use into account, so even if you do take 2,000 points of damage from Where Art Thou, you're at least adding a level 1 monster like Breaker Bunkle to our hand to have more of a protection play for our Appliancer monsters, because you do have to normal summon that monster if you have that play, or you could just have the 1 level 1 monster the following turn, activating Where Art Thou, and then going for that normal summon so you don't take the burn damage from it. I also run 2 copies of Limiter Removal for the machine double power, with some of our Link monsters being able to hit for some bigger numbers thanks to this card. And then you can use other cards to avoid the destruction play of those monsters by activating cards like Appliancer Conversion after they attack to then banish them and summon them back onto the field as all new monsters. For some of the one-ofs for the spells, I run 1 copy of Monster Reborn, 1 copy of 1 for 1, 1 Call by the Grave, and 1 Terraforming for the field spell search, graveyard, shutdown of your opponent's cards, special summon of any of your Appliancer monsters from your deck, and also from the graveyard thanks to Monster Reborn. And then the only trap I run is the 1 copy of Metaverse. So we have the search along with Terraforming for our field spell, since it's just a searcher being able to activate it and then have that play on your opponent's turn to add 1 additional Appliancer monster to our hand. So you can add cards like Breaker Buckle and then have another protection card for your Appliancer cards. Moving on now to the extra deck, I run 3 copies of Appliancer Celtopus. You need 2 Appliancer monsters. This Link Summon card. Link card cannot be targeted by your opponent's card effects or their monster's attacks. And during damage calculation, if an Appliancer Link monster you control co-linked to this card battles an opponent's monster, your battling monster gains attack equal to the number of co-link cards. This card times 1,000. And during that damage calculation only. So you can have 2 cards co-linked to this card and hit for some pretty big numbers with your other Appliancers. And once per turn, if an Appliancer Link monster you control that is not co-linked to this card is destroyed by battle or card effect, draw one card. So Celtopus is really your go-to resource card in the deck, being able to give you draw power, but also be able to rely on protecting itself when it's in the extra monster zone and being linked to other cards on the field or their monster's attack. So this linked card cannot be, so it doesn't have to be co-linked, it just has to be even linked to another Appliancer. The other Appliancer monsters just gain different effects whether they are not co-linked or co-linked. We are also running 3 copies of Appliancer Laundry Dragon. It cannot be used as link material the turn it is link summoned. Neither player takes any battle damage from attacks involving this card. And once per turn, after damage calculation, if this co-link card battles an opponent's monster, you can banish that opponent's monster. And once per turn, after damage calc, if this monster that is not co-linked battles an opponent's monster, you can destroy that monster. And if you do, inflict damage to your opponent equal to their original attack. So Laundry Dragon, I would say, is one of your big boss monsters in the deck because it can hit for some pretty big numbers thanks to Celtopus just being able to raise its attack points of the co-link monsters times 1,000 for each one that do battle. So you can hit for 3,500 attack thanks to your Laundry Dragon, and then either have a banish or destruction play depending on whether or not it's co-linked or not co-linked. I also run 3 copies of Appliancer Vacuum Elephant. With this card, it cannot be used as link material. The turn it is link summon, can attack directly while it is not co-linked, and you can send one card from your hand to the graveyard, target one card your opponent controls, destroy it, and if this card is co-linked, you can target one monster your opponent's main monster zone and destroy it. So with this card, you have either the option to send one card from your hand to the graveyard if it's not co-linked, to target a card your opponent controls and destroy it, and if it's co-linked, having just an easy destruction of a card in the main monster zone. You're going to use one Appliancer Vacuum Elephant effect per turn, and only once that turn, but depending on what you want to do, and also where its arrow points, you can have it point in this position to Celtopus, or not when it's in this one. Also, 3 copies of Appliancer Propel Lion. Cannot be used as link material. The turn's link summon. It can attack directly. And also, once per turn during damage calc, if your opponent's monster battles an opponent's monster while this card is co-linked, you can make that monster's attack become 0 during damage calc. And once per turn during damage calc, if this monster that is not co-linked battles an opponent's monster, you can make that opponent's monster's attack 0. So it's more of a defensive one while not co-linked, and then more of an offensive one while co-linked thanks to this card. Also running 2 copies of Kappa Scale and 1 copy of Dryer Drake. More situational monsters. The real setup come in the form of your Laundry Dragon, Vacuum Elephant, and Propel Lion. But you can still use cards like Kappa Scale to give you a special summon resource from the graveyard, and Dryer Drake to swap some positions with your other Appliancer monsters when you need to use them for those plays. As for some of the go-to plays in the deck, like I said before, with the special summon setup, if you have Socket Roll and your Copy Bockle, you can summon out your Socket Roll and then special summon Copy Bockle by targeting appliance monster you control, and this card's name becomes that monster. So then with Socket Roll's effect, since you special summoned a Socket Roll, you can gain another special summon of a Socket Roll onto the field, giving you 3 monsters here for your play. You'll then use the 2 to summon out your main go-to Appliancer in the extra monster zone, being your Appliancer Celtopus. And then you can, depending on the play you want to go for with your opponent, use the last Appliancer monster to summon out your go-to. So you can use cards like Laundry Dragon. So it all comes down to what play you want to go for. You can summon them to either arrow that the Celtopus is pointing to. Summoning it here will make it co-linked, and then with this card, it being co-linked, battles opponent's monster, you can banish that monster. So with this card being able to swing then, and also have your Celtopus, your battling monster gains attack equal to the number of monsters co-linked to this card. You have that play to rely on with this additional summon. If you go for this co-link play, you have, let's say, one other card in your hand that could give you a special summon of an Appliancer monster from your graveyard. You can activate cards like Appliancer Reuse, Monster Reborn, you name it, giving you that summon onto the field of that other Appliancer monster. And then you can use that Appliancer monster on the field to go for one more summon, like cards like Vacuum Elephant. And then with that, you've set up another Appliancer monster, co-link, making it even stronger for Celtopus to power up Laundry Dragon. And with those cards, if you use other ones like your spell card to change the position with Conversion, being able to banish your Appliancer monsters and then resummon them back into the field, you can set it up so they are still linked to Celtopus, protecting this card, but they're no longer co-linked. And with that, you don't have any restriction for their non-co-linked effects to be able to activate on a different turn. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoyed. It's a really interesting deck. If you're looking for a deck that focuses on co-link and not co-link plays, this is definitely one of those decks to consider. And as always, until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. And Kira, Twig out.